Hello and welcome to More Than the Score for this week. Tony Moakley here, joined by the man who needs to be in the AFL Statisticians Hall of Fame, the one, Troy Zantuck. How are you, Troy?
Great to be here, Tone. Really enjoyed last week's show. Some great response to interstaters that become VFL champions, and another blockbuster episode ready for the viewers.
I'm really looking forward to this one because you're going to be picking over the Apple Isle, and I cannot wait to hear your thoughts on, well, at least two of the players that beautiful part of the world has produced, two absolute dead set legends in the VFL too. Before we get to that, Troy, however, I want to point listeners to the current season of the AFL, which kicks off in about a week's time. If you need the best coverage of the game, well, you can either go to 3RW Radio or you put yourself in some fine company.
Oh, yes. Takeover TV time. It's going to be massive.
You're
some
right.
big names are coming on board. Yourself, you'll be part of the team.
At some point.
Mark Fine from SEN, formerly of SEN, an absolute superstar as far as knowledge and stats of the game. Some huge names in the footballing world. The Incredible Hulk, Renee Kink. One, Kevin Bartlett, if you don't mind.
Wow, good get.
Campbell Brown. And I tell you what, there's just a plethora of knowledge, entertainment, and just good fun. So that's all kicking off on the 11th, I believe, fingers crossed. And the great John Olb will be taking us through our paces, Tone. And also, just on the comedic side, and obviously you being one of the best, we're going to have Trevor Marmalade on board as well.
Well, what more do you need? That is one hell of a lineup. So just tell us how it works, please, Troy.
Well, what we're doing, we're actually going to watch the games.
Yep. And
obviously we're all going to be on Zoom or a platform as such. Yep. And we're all going to put our bibs in. So to speak. We're all going to have a little bit of a comment on the game, how it's travelling, who's playing well, who needs to lift.
That sounds magnificent, and that will be live, and that will be next week when round 2 kicks off. I always keep finding myself saying round 1, but of course round 1 is done and dusted. It's not
round 2.
Cold calls.
Tone, it's great to have it back. It's, winter's hit us now. And it just wouldn't be winter without the football. So great to have it back.
Without, watching the game, dissecting the game, and bitching and moaning about the AFL. It's just...
That's pretty much it.
I'm thrilled to have it back. All right, Troy, we had a cracking episode last week where you were able to just roll out, oh my God, what an array, a stunning array of interstate talent that had graced football fields in Victoria, and that we as Victorians had been lucky enough to see. Many of these players obviously in their prime. There are too many interstate players who have come over and starred in the VFL for us to cover in one episode. So this is essentially the spillover episode of that. Tasmania was left essentially off the map last week because we ran out of time. You are going to rectify that.
I am.
I'm just going to say over to you now as we discuss some of the great non-Victorian players who have played in the VFL.
Well, as I said to you last week, Tone, and you had two in mind yourself, and I'm sure that these two will pop up very shortly.
Yep.
But you could put these 4 guys in probably the best 10 to 15 guys that have ever played the game, full stop.
Yep.
So I'm going to start off with a triple Brownlow medalist, if you don't mind, umpire.
Yes.
Now, Ian Stewart, one of the game's greats. He was recruited from Hobart on the Apple Isle, went to Tasmania, played 127 games with the Saints. Then he went over to Richmond and played 78 games with the Tigers and was a wonderful player there, winning another Brownlow. So he won 2 at the Saints, went over to the Tigers, won a Brownlow there. The thing about Ian Stewart, Tone, an amazing player with precision foot skills, an amazing balance. He was beautifully balanced. he debuted for the Saints in 1963, or way back in 63. He played in that emotional and historic 1966 flag, won 2 BNFs, and then he crossed over to the Tigers in somewhat controversial circumstances. He's involved with a swap with Bill Barrett, who was a legend at the Tigers, and he went over there in 1970, played in the 73 flag, Ian Stewart, and in rarefied air, as I said, with 3 Brownlow medals, 65, 66, and he won the Brownlow in 71 with the Tigers.
I would imagine 50 years on or so, Saints supporters still haven't forgiven him. Would I be fair in saying that, Troy?
Saints supporters haven't forgiven Ian Stewart?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know where that's only. He won 2 Brownlows with them, played in a flag.
Yeah.
So I think he served the Saints pretty well.
All right. I have a memory of him on World of Sport. Am I right in thinking that he had a TV career after football?
Well, he actually coached South Melbourne.
Yep.
He was actually coached when my brother was playing at South Melbourne during the 70s.
Yep.
And he actually coached Carlton for a little while.
Yeah.
So,
he's a legend. And there's another, there's no end of goodwill that I have towards him then. What a superstar bloke. What an amazing human being. And where is the Nobel Peace Prize?
Over-egging the pudding again, Tony Moclair, but beautifully done. Wasn't the most successful coaching career at the Blues, but he did take the Swans, I should say South Melbourne, to the finals in 1977, an elimination final against the Tigers, which they got walloped, but it was a massive effort to get South Melbourne into the finals in 77. So Ian Stewart, one of the all-time greats. Now, I'm interested to hear, you had 2 in mind last week, Tony.
Yes.
Who were the 2 Tasmanians that you had in mind?
Well, Richo is number 1, obviously.
Richo?
Now, am I right, Troy, in suspecting his dad played as well and was no slouch either?
Absolutely spot on. Bull Richardson played for the Tigers and also played for the Swans as well. But Richo, what a player he was. 800 goals. He was a shining star in a galaxy with no planets, stars, meteors or comets.
Yeah.
He held that Richmond team together for many years, and he was a draw card too, Tony. He bought those Richmond fans, when they didn't have much to cheer about, he brought them through the turnstiles.
He really did. He was a one-man opera week in, week out. He wore it on his sleeve, and people loved him for that. He was an opposition player you could not hate, no matter how well he was playing, and he often played brilliantly well because he just read the ball so well. And he was great. He was a great footballer. And our paths crossed when I worked at a commercial rock station years ago.
Yes.
And on top of it, really lovely guy, like really genuinely lovely guy. And, it's part of football lore, I know that, but Richo spitting the dummy about the lack of delivery to him.
Oh, yeah.
It just became part of football folklore. And, German word Schadenfreude, enjoying the pain of others, that may have come
right.
But, look, the record stands.
It does.
Great player.
And you could just, if Richo, and that little word with a big meaning, if he had played in a successful team at centre-half forward, wow, he could have racked up multiple premierships. He was an absolute star.
That, isn't it?
Mm.
But look, as it stands, he's a loved great of the game, and I think he took a lot of. You could look at the 2017 Premiership and reflect on how much he had helped contribute to that.
Absolutely, and he's parlayed his immense football talent into a wonderfully successful media career.
Yeah.
So good on him. He's done really well.
So that was one of the Tasmanian greats.
Yes.
I hope I'm right in thinking that the other one was Gary Lyon.
No. Gary was from Kyabram.
Yeah.
But you know what? I reckon you are right. He was born. He was born in Tasmania.
All right, there you go.
So, you are technically right, Tony Moclair, but he grew up in Kyabram.
All right.
And plied his trade there. And he became a tremendous footballer for Melbourne, captain, All-Australian, BNFs, leading goal kicker, you name it. So that's a great get, Tone. So those two guys, I actually didn't have in my top four, but well done. I've got another Tasmanian, born and bred and played all of his junior football there. He went back and he coached. And he actually became a state minister post his football career. He was nicknamed Mr. Magic or the Doc. He was recruited from Latrobe in Tasmania, played 119 games for the Saints, 237 goals, debuted in 1962. He was the Saints captain in that magnificent 66 flag where he's holding up the cup in a Collingwood jumper, as you like to mention. He was a genius, let's be honest, Tone. Incredible ball skills at ground level and a great mark for his size. I would term him the Nostradamus of the Sherrin because he saw what was happening before the ball got to him. He just had an amazing peripheral vision, and he won 3 BNFs. Obviously, with the Saints, he was Team of the Century, Hall of Famer, represented Victoria, ironically, 10 times, and represented Tasmania 15 times. The Doc, what a wonderful player. Daryl Baldock, Mr. Magic with the ball.
I had no idea he went on to a political career afterwards. But that's...
I reckon it was maybe mid-70s to early 80s, and he had success also in the racing industry. He loved his horses.
Yep.
So he was a man of many talents and a wonderful cricketer who represented Tasmania.
Well, some guys have all the luck. What an extraordinary individual. If we were just to take a tiny detour here, Troy Zantuck, the only other AFL player I can think of who's gone into politics after football is, of course, Harry Madden. Are there any others that you know of?
Well, Harry is the one that readily springs to mind. We might have to do some research there, Tone.
Yeah, that's okay. All right. Just put that one on the back burner for now. Daryl Baldock from Tasmania. I want to know who else. I've
got two absolute superstars of the game, and they were 60s and 70s players. Now, this guy here, he was recruited from Clarence. He went to the Tigers, played 187 games there, 369 goals for the Tigers. One of the greatest centre-half forwards of all time. And he actually penned a book at the age of 22 where you had to name the greatest team of all time, and he put himself in the greatest team of all time at centre-half forward at the age of 22. Let's be honest, low on self-confidence. The great Royce Hart.
Oh, magnificent.
Royce Hart. 4 flags. Two of those as captain in 73 and 74. AFL, Richmond, Tasmanian Team of the Century, Hall of Famer, you name it. His trademark was that magnificent leap that he had, and he'd ghost in from the side, a wonderful mark, and a left foot kick, very underrated, a penetrating left foot kick, and one of the Tigers' all-time favourites, Royce Hart.
That is magnificent. I want to know, Troy, when did he finish playing? Because it must have been growing up in Mildura, which was a Richmond recruiting zone.
Yeah.
So Royce Hart is the talk of Royce Hart for me is very vivid. Although I never would have seen him play, he's certainly very familiar, if you know what I mean.
Oh, absolutely. The famous number 4 made it famous, and a lot of kids during the 60s and 70s would have had their duffel coat emblazoned with the number 4 on the back if you're a Tigers supporter. He started his career with the Tigers in 67, and he finished in 77.
Okay,
his knees were absolutely shot.
Yep.
So injuries curtailed his career. But, those 10 years for Tigers fans, unforgettable.
Can I ask if you've read that book, How Great I Am by Royce Hart?
Well, that's what the title should have been. The best ever. GOAT. I'm the GOAT and you're not. By Royce Hart.
Okay. I love it. I love it. Good on
at the age of 22, Tone, not after his career where he's 42 or 52, just starting, just 4 years into a VFL career. And hello, I'm the best ever.
Here we go. Reminds me of Napoleon when he was being crowned. He was a bit annoyed that the Archbishop was taking so long, so he just grabbed the crown and did it himself.
He just grabbed the crown.
Spirit of Royce Hart. I love it. All right.
Help you.
This has been an absolute eye-opener so far.
Look, these guys are just absolute legends of the game. But the guy I've got next, wow, he's right up there. Hawthorn supporters.
Oh, how would I have not got
this guy?
Jeez. All right.
Come on, Tone.
Yep.
Now, I'll tell you what, this guy, he was recruited from New Norfolk in Tasmania, and he put through a lazy 378 goals. This is before he started his VFL career. So that sort of got the attention of the VFL talent scouts.
Yeah.
Surprisingly. Look, then he went on to Hawthorn, played 129 games with the Hawks. Forget this, 727 goals.
That is astonishing.
But this is the part of the equation that I'm most fascinated by. He went back to Tasmania after absolutely slaying them in the VFL. He went back to Glenorchy and kicked 616 goals post his VFL career.
For a grand total of what, Troy? If you've got that off the top? Between the two
over his career, look, I'm only guessing, but I reckon it's around over 1,700 goals.
That is astonishing.
In just under 300 games. So his average, I know his average because this is very famous, his average goals in the VFL, I think, were over 5.5. So 5.5, get your head around that. Every time he went out, he'd kick nearly 6 goals a game. It's extraordinary.
Wow, that really is. So, can you tell us why the VFL career was relatively short? Then that's maybe 5-6 years in that game total.
Look, he obviously he had a few injuries.
Yep.
He did his knee, and that put him out of action for a while. And then he come back in his last season, and this is an incredible stat. In 1977, he come back to play for Hawthorn.
Yep.
He'd spent a little bit of time back in Tasmania. And in his last year of VFL football, it was in 1977, he kicked 110 goals in his last season.
Was that with the bung knee?
Well, his mobility wasn't great.
Yep.
So, but the way he read the play, it was uncanny. And those flat punts that he kicked were a trademark, and they were very straight, very unfashionable, but they certainly went through, over 1,700 times during his career. So Peter Hudson, and a nicer bloke too, Tone. I've had the pleasure of meeting Peter at the Emerald Hotel in Clarendon Street, South Melbourne.
Yep.
That's like the centre of the VFL AFL universe.
Yep.
For all the older guys, they all get back there. And Peter's just a wonderful guy. So a fantastic player, but a fantastic person as well. And he also holds the record. It'd be remiss of me not to mention this, equal with Bob Pratt for 150 goals in a season, which he kicked those in 1971. So he kicked 150 goals in a season, equaling Bob Pratt's record of 150. Amazing.
That is, as a CV, that's without parallel, you'd almost have to say. And just goes to show how savvy the recruiters are at Hawthorn. Can't repeat that enough. They're just some of the smartest people in the business, and they've been for a long time. And also proves that no Victorian can do the heavy lifting when it comes to goal kicking at the Hawks, because you look at Hutto would obviously be ahead of one Jason Dunstall from Queensland. So I'd like to know, top Victorian goal kicker at Hawthorn, who the hell would that be?
Well, obviously Dunstall is in the top 4 goal kickers of all time with was 1254 from memory. But obviously the average, when the averages on the 129 games that Hutto played, 727 goals over 5.5 a game. It's off the charts. It's really, when you think about it, and there was some tremendous fullbacks around that 60, 70 era when Peter Hudson played. So he wasn't playing against any wood ducks. He was playing against the absolute best. You know, there would have been maybe 6 or 7 top-line fullbacks in that era. So
that's a great point. And the other thing too, one field umpire to not see, you know, obviously following.
Great point.
And you know that fullbacks had certain quivers or certain bows in their quiver, or however you tricks of the trade, none of which were legal, of course, as we know, or right on that line.
Yeah.
And wouldn't have been shy about impeding Hutto.
You're absolutely spot on. And those impediments, I would imagine, would have left Hutto a little battered and bruised in the post-match celebrations. Let's just say that.
From memory, Troy, he wasn't a big, imposing full forward, was he?
No, he wasn't. He was wiry, but he had amazing core strength.
Yep. Okay.
So he wasn't, as you said, he wasn't, a Greek Adonis by any stretch of the imagination, but he was one of those wiry guys who had deceptive strength. But Peter Hudson's absolute trademark was the way he read the ball. What he'd do, he'd lead the fullback up with him and then double back at the last minute, and the ball would just happen to fall into his arms. He was just, incredible. I've never seen a full forward manoeuvre like Peter Hudson.
He had, again, you know, we talk about this often, players who are just absolutely revered at their clubs, and there's almost like a minute's silence after their name is mentioned. There's that disbelief that your club was lucky enough to get the service of somebody who was so out of the box, somebody who was so kind of once in a generation. And Collingwood players speak about Dacos like that, and Geelong players talk about Gary Ablett like that.
Sure.
I've always noticed Hawthorn supporters are like that about Hutto. And any Hawthorn supporter my age, I'm 50, or slightly younger than me, will always express a really profound regret that they didn't get to see him play. And you can understand that.
Absolutely, Tone. You're spot on. And Hawthorn were lucky enough to have Peter Hudson and Jason Dunstall, two of the greatest, full forwards, of all time. So, yeah, amazing. Now, I've knocked over the 4 that I wanted to knock over with the Tasmanians.
Yes.
I've got some New South Welshmen you may be interested in.
Oh, no shortage of talent there either. We covered off Wayne Carey last week, of course. We got Paul Kelly last week.
Yes, great. That was a great get on your behalf. Paul Kelly, loved Paul Kelly.
We even got Shane Crawford, who was born in New South Wales too, from memory.
And another great get by you, Tony Moclair from Finley, obviously from Tom Hawkins, Jack Hawkins, and Yabby Jeans. Alan Jeans was from Finley as well.
So talent, so I'm very keen to know who we missed out then.
Well, what about a bloke who became an Essendon legend, started his career at South Melbourne. He grew up on the farm in Hungary. I'm talking about a man with the initials TD. And Essendon fans love this man.
Brothers who played, would he?
Yes, he might have.
One of the most beloved people post-football, you'd have to say. Absolute, talk about an absolutely adored and loved man. Tell us, please, about the career of one Terence Danaher.
Terence Danaher, and that is his name, Terence. So very well done there. Yeah, look, the way it all happened, he debuted for South Melbourne way back in 1976. And then he was involved in, it was a very highly publicised swap at the time with Neville Fields, who was a very skillful centreman for Essendon. So the swap was Fields to South Melbourne, Terry Danaher, and sight unseen, his brother Neil to the Bombers, if you don't mind, umpire. So he only played 19 games with South Melbourne, but he showed enough, and he went on to the Bombers in 1978. He played 294 games, kicked 447 goals. He retired in 1992. 2 flags, those famous back-to-backs in 84, 85, Tone.
Yep.
He was the MVP, the most valuable player in 1983 in the whole of the league. 3 All-Australian Guernseys, Essendon AFL Hall of Famer, Terry Danaher.
Also
one of the best.
Was he not a coach? He coached
Neil coached Melbourne. Neil coached Melbourne. Yeah. Right. And unfortunately, Neil's career was cut short because of injury, but there were good judges that said Neil had more natural ability than Terry. So unfortunately, we didn't get to see the best of Neil Danaher, but gee whiz, an amazing football family. Obviously, Anthony and Chris, the other brothers that played at the highest level.
That was my next question, because I know Mr. and Mrs. Danaher were very good at supplying the AFL, VFL with stocks of talent.
It was all a matter of supply and demand.
Exactly. Well, Essendon seemed to have a lock on it. Lucky them. All right, so they're up there in terms of New South Welshmen who have dominated, but I have a feeling there are more, Troy, and you're going to tell us now.
Just on Wayne Carey, I just wanted to touch on him just a little bit more.
Yeah.
Obviously, most people know he was recruited from North Wagga in New South Wales. Then he went on to he went to Adelaide, and he played with North Adelaide in the Sandful, but he didn't play at senior level. He played in the reserves, and then the Kangas swooped, and he debuted in 1989 for the mighty Kangas. Over 240 games, 671 goals, I believe, from 89, and he finished his career in 01 under terrible circumstances, which obviously everyone knows about. But then he went to Adelaide. All up, he played 272 games, 727 goals, the same number as Peter Hudson. So that's pretty esteemed company.
Yeah.
Arguably the greatest player of all time. A lot of ex-footballers that I speak to, Tone, friends of mine that have seen a lot of footy, they rate him the best. Look, it's a great argument. There's Lee Matthews, there's Gary Ablett Senior. There's many that you can throw up, but his kicking for a man his size, his aggression, his leadership on the field, he was just an incredible player. 2 flags as captain in 96 and 99. 2 most valuable players, 7 All-Australian Guernseys, 4 of those as captain, 4 BNFs with the Kangas, Team of the Centuries, Hall of Fame, North Melbourne, AFL, you name it. What an incredible resume for an incredible player.
Well, I was watching some old clips of him playing. What he had for a relatively young man, from memory watching him play, was immense self-belief.
Yes.
He had that. You could compare him to Jordan. I've just started watching that incredible documentary on Jordan.
How good's that?
This is a pretty rickety comparison at this stage, Troy, but I guess what marks out genius sportsmen like that is an unshakable self-belief that when they get on the paddock or the playing field, that they are, the agent of change, if you like, that they can affect the outcome of the game simply by almost sheer force of will and talent alone. And Carey had that.
That is a great take. I couldn't have said it better, Tone. An incredible self-confidence that if the game's in the throes of defeat, well, he could snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. That well-worn cliche, but he famously said, and I don't know whether this is apocryphal, but the runner come out to him on occasion, and he was playing against a guy who was maybe playing his fifth or sixth game of AFL football. And he said to the runner, Wayne Carey, look, can you get me the record? And the runner looked at him and he said, why, Duck? He goes, I just want to know who I'm playing on. What's this bloke's name? So he had some pretty handy put downs.
Yeah.
That as a young bloke, you're in your fifth or sixth game. How are you going to feel about, one of the greatest players of all time having a crack at you like that? Who's this bloke? I don't know his name. You have to get the record out for me. So
that's a ripper. That's as far as psychological tactics go. That is definitely a good one. I'd heard a story about Wayne Carey on very early on, or maybe season 1 or season 2, on an end of season trip. There was a Barney involving the players, and it was Wayne Carey who kind of got everyone out of the way, all the players, to have a crack at the guy who was mouthing off at the North Melbourne playing group. He was a junior player at that point, and it essentially said to the rest of the playing group, I am the guy who will eventually lead you. Do you know what I mean? He had that, what the US Marines call command. And,
I think I've heard that story,
right.
Also, Tone. So I know where you're coming from. From good reports, the Duck could handle himself.
Indeed.
He was,
Yeah, certainly on the field. How he managed himself off the field, completely different story. But as I think you've alluded to, Troy, that's been well covered. And if you now remit here at more than the score.
So they're my two absolute superstars from New South Wales, Tone. And I've got a couple from the ACT. Now you'll know both of these guys. Gee.
Yeah, of course, yes.
And tell me about your memory of this bloke who was mustachioed.
It was probably the greatest VFL trade swap between us and Ukraine.
Yes.
Ukraine got a guy called Bob Culpert who went to the UFL, never kicked on, but we got one Alex Jezelenko.
Yeah. Your beauty. Yeah, what a great... he come from Eastlake, one of the dominant clubs of the time in the ACT. And Jezza, 256 games, 424 goals. Do you have to say any more about the bloke? An absolute legend, not just amongst Carlton people, but I think he was much loved by opposition supporters as well.
It's a great way of putting it. Again, just to refer back to what I was saying, the reverence that people had for Hutto, they still have definitely at Carlton for Alex Jezelenko. And, then Brendan Favola wearing that number 2, the 25, he wore that as well to great effect. It's an almost spiritual number, I would argue, at Carlton. There was just something about, and Jezza is competing with some really huge names, John Nichols and so many more, Kernahan at Carlton. But there is a special aura about the man. Also, the coaching, leaving we love and it's sad that the era of the captain coach is gone, but of course I would believe he was the last captain coach to have won a premiership. Would I be right? 1979?
Absolutely right, Tone. Yeah. And
left the ground on crutches.
Yeah, he was injured in that grand final, and it's the great memories, aren't they? I can, not being a Carlton supporter, but I can actually remember it like it was yesterday. Yeah.
And see, the thing is that, there were the magnificent feats on the field, the 1970 mark, and, you can go on and on and on. But then there was also, you forget how tumultuous it was off the field when he was coaching and then being sacked, and then he goes to St Kilda. And there was all that kind of all that drama that played out after his magnificent career on the field. So, I don't know, worthy of a mini-series if you ask me, but just...
The Thornbirds, it's got the Thornbirds written all over it.
It just needs right. It does need a bit of the Colin McCulloch treatment.
Yeah, that's right. And Richard Chamberlain could play Jezza. Although I think Richard's gone to the big bloke upstairs, but he was Dr. Kildare, wasn't he, Tone?
Oh, that rings a bell. That rings a bell. I'm just imagining a stormy members meeting at Festival Hall and the wind blowing through what's left of Jez's hair as he battles with the board to maintain his job. I'm just trying to give it a bit of Colin McCulloch treatment here, but it doesn't. Yeah, anyway, the mini-series, look, great idea. Let's do it. Who else from the ACT? I know there is another very big...
and he's a recent addition to the superstars of the AFL, VFL, James Hird.
Of course.
From Ainsley Football Club.
Yep.
253 games for the Bombers, 343 goals, 5 BNFs, 5 All-Australians, 3 Anzac medals, 1 Brownlow medal in 96, 7 years as the captain of the club. He won the Norm Smith medal in 2000, played in the Two Flags, Essendon Hall of Famer, Team of the Century. The incredible stat about James Hird is where he was taken in the 1990 draft.
This will be good. I'm looking forward to hearing this number.
This will blow your mind. 79th.
Yeah. If anything underscores how random, I know there's a better word, but I don't think anybody would ever say it's a perfect system, the draft, and that kind of proves it. Or either that, or James Hird just hadn't shown any of that incredible potential.
I think there's an element to that.
Right.
I think James Hird sounds a bit corny, but he grew into himself.
Yeah.
He's very light when he come to the Bombers, and obviously he put on weight as his career progressed. But those sublime skills, Mike Sheehan, obviously one of the best journalists that we've had football-wise.
Yeah.
He rates James Hird right up there as far as football nous.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, he is a very smart guy, and I'm very keen to know, because you mentioned the 1 Brownlow. That surprises me. I'm keen to know how close he came to winning another one, Troy. Do you have any idea how he figured in counting either side of those Brownlows, the Brownlow that he won?
He was a consistent polar, but he didn't, obviously, he wasn't runner-up, unluckily. Or James Hird, for all the games that he played, he went through periods where he was injured.
Yeah, okay.
So that obviously that impacts on, with a Brownlow year, you just need to have a terrific run.
Yeah. With
games, and just clock them up. If you play half the season, you're gone. So with James Hird, that year that he won it, with Michael Voss, 2 fairly good players. Yeah. So Hirdy, he's a magician. To watch him ply his trade, I love watching him. Now, I don't know whether we've got time, Tone, for some Western Australians that we may have, that I'd love to talk about.
Yeah, I'm just going to make one point about James Hird. I could never get that excited about him. I guess I have herd immunity.
Herd immunity.
Thank you. Thank you.
Magnificent.
Had to get that one away. WA. I mean, forget the iron ore mines. There's something that they have been more blessed with than natural resources in WA, and that is incredibly good footballers. And I say that this week, Troy.
Yeah.
Off there, but I say that this week, having read about how Patrick Cripps spent the 2 or 3 weeks in isolation, which is on the family farm, no internet, mobile phone doesn't work. He spends the days with his girlfriend and his family surfing, sailing, pig hunting.
What more can you ask for? I love that.
Oh,
that is old school. Old school. Yeah.
Just love it.
And real world stuff, Tone.
Yeah.
Real world stuff.
Absolutely. So this, there is going to be some some staggering talent that you're about to tell us about. WA players who have distinguished themselves in the VFL, having made the long journey over the Nullarbor. Go ahead, Troy.
Well, we mentioned some absolute superstars last week, but one of my favourites from North Melbourne, he come over from Perth. He played 225 games with Perth. He came over to North. He played over 110 games, I reckon he played. Kicked over 130 goals. Now, won 3 Sandover medals, Tone, this bloke, in 64, 68 and 73. He won the Perth Best and Fairest 7 times. Yeah. He won the North Best and Fairest in 1970. He played in those 2 historic premierships for the Kangas in 75 and 77. One of the greatest rovers of all time. Handball and a beautiful drop kick were his trademarks.
Oh, okay.
Barry Cable.
That's so good they named a beach after him in Broome.
Oh, you're too good, mate. You're too quick. And Jim Carey did a great version of him too.
Did he really?
The cable guy.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Yes.
Barry Cable.
Again, a familiar name. And yes, I have a very dim memory of him being discussed. But yes, you mentioned Barry Cable and the name is not unfamiliar.
Well, I've got another name here, a guy who used to terrorise Carlton. Yeah. And what a player this guy was. He blind turns, balks, recruited from South Fremantle, went to the Tigers, played 118 games there. 2 BNFs. He was runner-up in the Brownlow in 83. And he won the Norm Smith medal in 1982. The year Carlton won the premiership.
Yes, he did too. Yes, great player. Yep. It's not often that a player from the losing team wins the Norm Smith, but...
Well, he was the first.
Think about how good this bloke was.
He was the first, the great Maurice Rioli.
Yes. Yep.
And hasn't that name just like keep on keeping on in the AFL with the Riolis, with Cyril, Dean, and Willie. Now it's West Coast Eagles. Just a conveyor belt of absolute superstar Indigenous talent.
It is. You've got to say your guarantee of footballing quality. The name Rioli, except no substitutes. He was, and look, you've got to say, real trailblazing Indigenous player as well. That, like I say, that 82 game was extraordinary. And, if you're a Tig, sadly didn't make the difference. But an excellent addition to the list, I have to say, Troy.
Yeah. And speaking of Indigenous talent from WA, these guys, when they come onto the scene, they drew people to the games and the turnstiles clicked over when these brothers come over from Western Australia. They were from Claremont. They come to North Melbourne. Who do you reckon I'm talking about? Brothers.
Jeez.
You
don't spell their name with a C, but with a K, I believe.
You certainly do.
They were a cracking pair of footballers.
They were, the Jim and Phil Cracker. And lucky enough to, as a kid growing up, to go down to Arden Street and meet them. And I won a great childhood memory to meet the Cracker brothers. They were amazing. Jim played about 130 games for North. And then he went to St Kilda to finish his career. I think Phil played 140 games for the mighty Kangas. And they were absolutely telepathic with the way that they knew where each other were.
Yeah.
With their handball and their kicking. And they just, the memories watching those guys play, strutting their stuff, the Cracker brothers, incredible.
Now, I know if you go to a lot of remote communities in WA, it's probably the same in the Northern Territory as well, Troy, where Aboriginal kids in remote communities are growing up playing the game, but they're not playing it with boots on. They're not playing it with shoes.
No, that's right. It's incredible.
Does that actually add to the skill? Does it? Is there a connection there, or is that just
an intangible, isn't it? I wouldn't imagine that it'd harm it.
No,
I would think it would enhance it. And just while we're on, obviously we've spoken about Morris Rioli, the Crackers.
Yep.
There was another guy that electrified crowds at Linton Street, St Kilda. One of the highly skilled superstar for the Saints.
Yes.
War number 7, Nicky Elvis Winmar.
Yes, that's exactly where my head was going. All right. I didn't know he was from WA, for some reason, but there you go.
Yeah, I think he was from South Freo.
Okay.
And he come over. I think he debuted as a 17-year-old in the Waffle.
Yep.
An extraordinary performance. And then the Saints come knocking on his door, and he gave them great service. He finished off his career with the Bulldogs. But Nicky Winmar, one of my absolute favourites.
And very, very much loved by Saints support.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And it's given us one of the most iconic moments in the AFL ever. I just don't think.
Yeah, and we spoke about that too, Tone, didn't we, with our iconic photographs episode?
Yep.
With Nicky pointing that day at Victoria Park, and that's etched in the memories of most people that were there that day and the AFL public in general.
But that aside, a great playing record and a great sportsman. So good on you, Nicky.
I've got two more superstars.
All right. They'd better be. I did mention Bazzusto, obviously, so that's why.
Oh, yeah, we mentioned the Buzz and Kenny Hunter last week.
Kenny Hunter, yeah. I'm just wondering if there's one you might be mentioning who played for Melbourne and Carlton who comes from WA. We'll see. You're going to tell us, Troy.
Oh, no, you're talking about the Duke.
The Duke of Earl.
Oh, yeah, the Duke. Oh, what a great... And the Duke, obviously the 95 premiership.
That electrifying moment in the first 10 minutes where he spoiled, and he just said...
It's set the tone for the day.
It
did. But one of the rare players, and I reckon there's a show in this that played over 100 games for both teams.
That is a great list. That is truly elite company that he is in.
And I reckon you may have mentioned that on radio.
Yes, I would have.
It's a great
we
start.
do a spot every Friday morning on Australia Overnight, starting midnight on 3AW. Troy Zanter comes in, and we have a chat about football, not surprisingly. And the great Duke of Earl did get a Guernsey the other day.
Oh, yeah, he's got to... look, the other two that I had, Tone, just quickly, and one of these guys, obviously, with 3AW, 6PR, an absolute legend of the game. And he made our he made our red-headed superstars team of the century.
Yes.
He was from South Freo as well. Started his career at the Dogs. Only played 47 games there, but guess what? Won a Brownlow in his first year in '85.
Wow.
Then he went to the Bears and played 100 games there and finished his career. He had the one season at Collingwood in 1992. Won the 1985 Brownlow. They did a Swan Lager commercial about him.
Yep.
You know, those ones where they said you'd never make it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Those ones.
And he won Simpson medals, Tassie medals. He won the 86 Bulldogs Best and Fairest. And then after, an altercation at VFL Park, round 21 against the mighty Blue Boys, started waving his jumper at then coach Mick Moldhouse. Took the jumper off in disgust at being dragged. Following season ends up at the Brisbane Bears.
Yep.
I'm talking about a man who had great ball use and evasive skills to kill for, Brad Hardy.
Oh, there you go. Wow. There's our second mini-series, I think.
Yeah.
That's got everything.
He was a gun, Brad, and played most of his career in the long sleeves. He debuted at the age of 16 in 1979, so he was a bit of a child prodigy.
Yeah.
And what a wonderful player. And my last nomination, Tone, is Ross Glendenning.
Oh, of course, yes. Another North Melbourne player. You got to have him.
Yeah. 1983 Brownlow medalist, an absolute star. Started his career in North at 78, and then he finished his last 2 years with the West Coast, where he was captain and gave them tremendous service. Yeah. He was built like Superman, and he played like Superman. He was terrific. Could play centre half forward, centre half back. Wonderful.
Lithe from memory, slippery, an absolute delight to watch. How many, just quickly, when the West Coast Eagles were established, how many Victorian-based players went back?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Notice, so I'm putting you on the spot there, but I'd love to know that. I'm always interested in players who kind of return to the fold, and I guess you could ask the same question about the Crows when they were established.
Yeah, Steve Malaxos went back.
Okay.
Steve Malaxos was with Hawthorn, and he went back. I think Peter Wilson, who played for Richmond, he went back to the West Coast Eagles. So they had basically a WA state side.
Yes.
When they played, it was a super strong team.
Oh my God! I was watching a repeat on Fox Footy the other day. There was a final that it may have been one of the first finals that West Coast Eagles were playing in, and it was just, I guess you forget how strong that team was.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like we're talking in 92, 93. There were just no passengers in that outfit. Of course, they won 92 and 94, I know, but they into the competition in 87. But they kind of gathered themselves very quickly.
They did, Tone. They did. But they had a strong base to gather from.
Yeah.
Because those players that played in that inaugural year, it was basically the Western Australian state team. So it was a stronghold. And to get into that team, it was no easy feat. I reckon Dean Laidley played in that team. Murray Rance, Alex Rance's father, who was previously with Footscray. They had some sensational players that we hadn't seen in Victoria that were stars for WA.
That was it, you see. And there was always this fear that they were only the tip of the spear and that WA had some kind of hole in the ground that they could just produce brilliant footballing talent from.
Well, obviously, you got guys like, you think of guys like starting out their careers, John Worsfold.
Yeah.
Chris Lewis.
Yeah, Chris Lewis again. Heady.
Brett Heady.
Yeah, and they were all really top-notch players.
Stars, absolute stars. But Ross Glendinning to come over, like one of West Australia's favourite sons, and captain that team, that was massive because he showed a lot of leadership. And I think, obviously, a new team, that's what they need. And unfortunately, that's what the Brisbane Bears didn't have.
Yeah. Well, look, they certainly righted that wrong with their three-peat. So if you're...
but it took a long time to get right, Tone. Yeah.
And merging with a Victorian club. So...
that helped.
Yeah, exactly. Troy, brilliant work as per usual. You are astonishing, as I said.
You're not too bad yourself.
T-Xanto needs to be in there.
You're not too bad yourself, Tone. You come up with some absolute pearlers. And Gary Lyon, that was a curveball.
All right.
Born in Tassie.
If I've stumped you, then I've done all right.
Nearly got through to the keeper. Nearly got through.
On my watch. All right. Well, we're going to be back next week. All going well, we're going to have a special guest. I'm not going to say
yes.
who, but, fingers crossed.
Don't say who.
No, I'm not going to give you this away.
And it's not Harry Who either from Get Smart. Yes.
All will be revealed hopefully next week. But we will be back next week. And don't forget round 1, which is about a week away here on Isolation TV with some big names. Give us those big names again, please.
Mark Fine, who I did... Yep. I reckon I did 7 years of radio with on SEN. And
we had radio talent, Finey. Love him.
Yeah, had a great time with Finey. As we spoke about at the start of the show, Tone, Trev Marmalade, Mad North Melbourne supporter.
Yep.
Obviously, we've got Renee King, the Incredible Hulk, Kevin Bartlett, Campbell Brown. Some really good talent and guys that have got forthright opinions and don't mind voicing them. So it's really exciting.
You're not wrong about that. And, of course, the man behind the bar, Trev, just giving you the lightheartedness that you'll need to cope with round 2 with no crowd. We'll see how we go with the sound effects. Troy, great work. And
Good on you,
we'll
Tone.
again next week here on Isolation TV.
Thanks, mate. Absolute pleasure.
This has been More Than the Score. You've been watching Troy Zantuck and myself, Tony Moakler. We'll be back next week.